Ministers Department Malaysia, All-Party Parliamentary Group Malaysia on Sustainable Development Goals, APPGM-SDG, and Institute of Strategy and International Studies, ISIS, Malaysia. Today, we are honored to have Honorable Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah, Minister of Foreign Affairs Malaysia, which will be joining us very shortly, excellencies from other member states, esteemed lineup of speakers, which the moderator shall introduce them in more detail shortly. Dedicated moderator for the discussion, Professor Dr. Denison Jayasuriya and Ms. Lavanya Rabaia, fellow guests and participants. Before we start with our event, a gentle reminder to all joining online. I would greatly appreciate it if you would please unmute your microphone to make sure we have a smooth running discussion. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we gathered here today for an important event which aimed at drawing a case study of Malaysia and 3 Southeast Asian countries' experiences of the partnership model in building back better through SDG localization. We will have 2 panel discussions, which focusing on Malaysia's context, and the other is on Southeast Asia countries, Thailand, Indonesia, and Philippines. Without wasting much time, I would like to give the floor to Honorable Datuk Sri Mustafa Muhammad, Minister in the Prime Minister's Department Economy of Malaysia, to give his recorded opening word of welcome.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Honorable Datuk Sri Saifuddin Abdullah, Minister of Foreign Affairs Malaysia, Honorable Datuk Sri Rohani Abdul Karim, Chairperson of the All-Party Parliamentary Group Malaysia on Sustainable Development Goals, APPGM-SDG, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the High-Level Political Forum, HLPF side event. First and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for co-hosting this side event. I must congratulate the Malaysian CSO SDG Alliance, APPGM-SDG, and ISIS Malaysia for organizing today's event. Let me also extend a warm welcome to distinguished panelists and participants to this side event in conjunction with the HLPF 2022. Today's dialogue, Building Back Better in Localizing SDGs, a case study of the Malaysian and 3 South Asian country experiences of the partnership model, is held in the spirit of strengthening partnerships between Indonesia, the Philippines, and Thailand, and enhancing cooperation at the grassroots level through sharing of best practices between multiple stakeholders, including the federal, state, and local governments, the private sector, and CSOs. Ladies and gentlemen, as we approach the halfway point of the 2030 agenda, the world's progress in SDGs is reported to be lagging behind. We urgently need to get our act together to get back on track and steer the course. To achieve meaningful progress, the impact of SDGs must be felt where they are most needed, and that is at the individual, community, and district levels. In this regard, localizing SDGs play an important role in building back better. It underscores our commitment to leaving no one behind. This is particularly important as one-size-fits-all approach is no longer feasible in addressing current challenges that are affecting different segments of society. Ladies and gentlemen, the localization concept is not new. Local governments in this country have adopted and implemented Local Agenda 21 since its introduction at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. The process requires local governments to consult with the local community, minority groups, and businesses to create local plans and programs that will contribute towards sustainable development. Localizing SDGs follow a similar approach. Adaptation of SDGs in a local context and successful implementation require active participation and strong cooperation from all levels of government, the private sector, academia, and CSOs. In the 12th plan, localizing SDGs is reflected in many sectors, including initiatives related to sustainable cities, eradicating poverty, improving health and well-being, as well as protecting the environment. For example, the Malaysian SDG Cities Initiative under the Ministry of Housing and Local Government was launched in September 2020 to ensure policy coherence at the national, state and local levels, as well as to help local governments mainstream SDGs in local plans. Another example is the Zero Waste Community Project, which promotes strong collaboration between B40 community groups and local governments to generate income from recycling activities. To date, this project has benefited more than 19,000 B40 households in 17 selected public housing complexes. I'm also pleased to announce that the government has begun the pilot project phase 1 of the hardcore poverty eradication program for 80 localities nationwide, involving about 3,000 families. Through this program, families, local leaders, district officers, state planning agencies, universities, corporations, CSOs will collaborate in executing income generation projects that are tailored to the resources and strengths in the respective communities. Ladies and gentlemen, the 12th plan recognizes the CSOs as development partners. In this regard, I would like to commend the APPGM-SDG and the Malaysia CSO-SDG Alliance for the active roles in forging stronger collaboration between parliamentarians, state and local governments, as well as local communities in implementing 121 local solution projects in 30 parliamentary constituencies. They have played an important role in helping local communities and the officials at the grassroots level understand what SDGs are all about. As an endorsement of the role APPGM-SDG has played in the last 3 years, the government has been gradually increasing funding for many of its activities. The world is on the path of recovery, albeit fragile and uneven. This forum is a good opportunity for us to share best practices and learn from each other to accelerate SDG implementation at the local level. On this note, I wish the panelists and all participants a productive meeting. Thank you. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Honorable Datuk Sri Mustafa, for a very remarkable opening speech and to have set the tone correctly for our event today. Before I pass the mic to our first moderator, Ms. Lavanya Brahmaiya, to kickstart our first panel discussion, a bit of housekeeping to the speakers. You are given only 6 minutes for your sharing, during which 3 cue cards will be showing by Ms. Zoel to alert you that you have 3 and 1 last minute of your speech before the time's up card is showing. All participants are encouraged to post your question in the chat box through our Facebook throughout the session. Our panelist speakers shall try to answer directly via chat, or we shall take them up during the Q&A session. Thank you. Ms. Lavanya, the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much, Rahma. And selamat petang, selamat pagi, good morning, good evening, dear friends, everyone. It really gives me great pleasure to moderate this next session following the rousing remarks by the Honorable Minister of Economic Planning in Malaysia. And our formidable panel of speakers will elaborate further on how partnerships have really driven building back better at grassroots level. Partnerships between federal and local government, the public sector, and local voluntary sections of society, and the unique role played by our parliamentarians as local SDG champions. Hence, today, we will hear the experiences shared by representatives from the federal government, local government, parliamentarians, as well as civil society in highlighting the Malaysian SDG innovation in building back better. It now gives me great pleasure to invite our first speaker, who is from our federal government, Mr. Kamaruzaman Umar, Deputy Secretary General of Policy and Sustainable Development from the Ministry of Housing and Local Government Malaysia, and he will elaborate on government agencies in the lead role of localizing SDGs. Mr. Kamaruzaman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Lavanya. Can you hear me? Okay.
Well, and
okay. First, thank you for inviting Ministry of Housing and Local Government of Malaysia to be part of the program. And indeed, it's a pleasure to be involved in this panel session together with other esteemed panelists. As the ministry that is responsible for, among others, providing affordable housing, championing sustainable urbanization, land use planning and management, and as well as transforming waste management towards circular economy, the ministry play important role in ensuring that Malaysia is on the right track to achieve 2 bold agendas of urbanization that were adopted by the international community: the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, and the New Urban Agenda, NUA. With SDG 11, the urban context became, for the first time, central for sustainable development, SDG 11 specifically aimed to renew and plan cities and other human settlement in a way that offer opportunities for all, with access to basic services, energy, housing, transportation, and green public spaces, while reducing resource use and environmental impacts. There is increasing recognition of the crucial role that state and local governments play in achieving and sustaining Malaysia's national and global agenda. State and local government are indispensable partner. Full and active engagement is needed to accelerate progress on SDG, including SDG 16 on peace, justice, and strong institution. KPKT is the chair of the Working Committee on Localizing SDG under the National SDG Governance, focusing on the implementation of SDG at the local level, notably SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. We have embedded and integrated SDG into our planning, policy making, and action. KPKT and various departments and agencies are committed to the SDGs area, SDGs cause, and have been championing the localizing SDG through various initiatives as follow. Malaysia SDG Cities Roadmap for Local Government. The role of local government implementing the sustainable agenda is important and has a significant impact on the achievement of the sustainable developments of the countries. SDG are important platform to guide the local government in formulating new approach to address existing and future urban challenges. To implement the national SDG roadmap, the need to align local SDG program and initiative with state and national, and this will support a bottom-up process where the city roadmap and voluntary local reviews by local government will provide the mechanism for implementation and monitoring. Therefore, KPKT through Urbanist Malaysia and the local government department has developed a guiding framework, the Malaysia SDG Cities Roadmap, to support cities through their local government to deliver the 2030 agenda. And the process is to encourage cities to establish their roadmap and action plan that cover a range of strategies, program, initiatives that align to the SDG goals and target. And two local authorities, namely Shah Alam and Subang Jaya, have submitted the SDG voluntary local review as an outcome of the SDG Cities Roadmap. And the state of Selangor is currently drafting the voluntary national review. To date, the Malaysian SDG Cities Network has expanded to almost 10 cities in Malaysia. And localizing SDG through the National Spatial Planning, with Plan Malaysia, the department under KPKT play important role, ensuring the ideas, use, development, and conversational land through its function at 3 levels of the government. And in this aspect, the SDG been embedded in Malaysia planning structure at the federal, state, regional, and local level through the 4th National Physical Plan and the 2nd National Urbanization Policy and the National Rural Physical Planning Policy. An application of SDG in development plan, which are statutory planning document, namely the structure plan, local plan, and special area plan. And we emphasize on the aspect of the SDG in research and development also, such as the planning guideline, as well as the implementation of localizing. SDG project implementation by the local government, we have about 307.5 million ringgit to a channel to SDG through projects by the local government, which is what have been said by our minister just now, the zero waste community project courses in the government housing program. And the objective is to educate the community to segregate solid waste, help improve the economy of the B40 families. And also we have the community hub project for PPR resident, which through Urbanists, we introduce community hubs and support the World Habitat Days, and also various strategic partners involved in making of these community hubs. And these are just some of the initiatives under the KPKT that we believe put the government in the lead role of the localizing SDG. However, the aspiration of a 2030 agenda rely to a great extent on the inclusion, contribution, and collaboration of a full range of cross-sector stakeholders, including large business and small and medium-sized enterprise, scientific community, non-profit and volunteer group, as well as civil society organization. And last and not least is multi-stakeholder collaboration and partnership are critical. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you for keeping to the time.
Thank you. Welcome,
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Now, with great pleasure, let me move on to our next speaker, who is none other than our Honorable Dato Sri Rohani Abdul Karim, who is the chairperson of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on SDGs in Malaysia, and also the Member of Parliament from Batang Lupar in Sarawak. She will be speaking on parliamentarians as SDG champions at policy and grassroots levels. Dato Sri, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Labanya, the moderator. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and greetings. And to the Honorable Dato Sri Saifuddin Abdullah, Minister of Foreign Affairs Malaysia, Honorable Dato Sri Mustafa Muhammad, Minister in the Prime Minister's Department Malaysia, Excellencies, panel speakers, fellow participants, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizer, especially the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who is very supportive for this kind of discourse, and not to forget the Economic Planning Unit Malaysia, APPGM-SDG, ISIS Malaysia, and the Malaysian CSO SDG Alliance. It is very timely to have this event in conjunction with the high-level political forum in 2022, which is held every year. It is a good time to showcase best practices. Malaysian experience is a very good example of parliamentarians' active role with the federal, state, and local government, as well as the active participation of local communities, CSO, NGO, and the academics. Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, are a global effort that has one major objective, that is achieving a better future for all. To achieve all these global and national targets, localization is a crucial leverage. It correlates how local, state, and federal governments can support the accomplishment of the SDGs through the bottom-up approach, and how the SDGs can provide a framework for policies and countries' development agenda. Localization is at the core of Malaysia SDG implementation strategy. At the federal level, EPU plays a pivotal role in designing the roadmap, executing and monitoring development policies and intervention. And we have been reporting the VNR twice. It is really a breakthrough for Malaysia to witness the progress that we have made thus far. It is also an opportune moment for Malaysia in terms of the development agenda, as our Malaysia plans 11 and 12 are mapped out accordingly to the SDGs framework, and not to forget the substantial work and facilitation by the UN bodies in leveraging the localization efforts further. Meanwhile, the All-Party Parliamentary Group Malaysia on Sustainable Development Goals, which I am the chairman, plays an active role in localizing the SDGs at the parliamentary constituencies level, which involves the other stakeholders like local and state government, as well as key community leaders. It is really a bottom-up approach. APPGM-SDG involved 56 parliamentary constituencies from 2020 to 2022, and we aim to cover all 222 constituencies by 2030. Our work has been showing evidences of how the parliamentarians play a major role in localizing the SDGs, and it is not too much to say that parliamentarians should be regarded as the SDGs local champion. The direct involvement of MPs is an aspect that is envisioned by APPGM-SDG from the very beginning. Our MPs have been involved with the mapping process of the local issues in their respective constituencies and engagement with other stakeholders like the government agencies, key community leaders, and civil society organizations. They're also contributing towards finding suitable solution projects to be implemented in their constituencies to address the issues and ultimately benefiting the people at the grassroots level. This means that the MPs are proactively involved in all stages of the SDGs localization. This is very important and crucial because the MPs are the representative of the people. Being elected by the people, they can take forward the people-centric development agenda by ensuring accountability and transparency. They represent the interests of the people and acting as an interface between people and institutions. Through the SDG localization and the constituency link, they should be able to seek ongoing input from local community-based and civil society organizations with the purpose of reflecting their perspective of the reality on the ground, and to constantly champion the local issues in the lower house of representative or Dewan Rakyat, which at the same time emphasizing their lawmaking role. Now, the budgetary role of the MPs, especially on the annual budget, take an additional critical importance in terms of ensuring that funds are effectively directed towards addressing the most important national SDG priorities. The 2030 agenda recognizes that ensuring accountability for achieving of the SDG is critical for it to deliver results for the people. One of the most important prominent roles of MPs, whether as members of government or opposition, is overseeing whether the executive branch delivers expenditure laws and programs to the people in an efficient, effective, and accountable.
But thank you so much, Dato' Sri Rohani. And next, we will now have an intervention by Mr. James Raj, who is the Executive Officer Solutions in the APPGM-SDG. And he will be speaking about SDG solution providers impacting the people and SDGs. Over to you, James.
Thank you very much, Lavanya, for your kind intervention and also introduction. And a warm greetings to all of you from Malaysia, truly Asia. I am delighted to share our APPGM-SDG experience in localizing SDGs in partnership with our 77 dedicated grassroots solution partners who have successfully conducted 121 micro SDG projects in 30 parliamentary constituencies with a small grant of USD 4,500 to 9,000 USD allocated for each project that applied a holistic and sustainable methodology. Of this effort, we have touched about 5,800 lives since 2020 till now. Our grassroots solution partners or local champions are from various categories of entities such as associations, private companies, universities, social enterprises, foundations, and cooperatives. We noted a dynamic wide range of local champions undertaking grassroots projects in localizing SDGs in 6 regions, covering 3 main themes, namely economy, social, and environment. Now, what is the role of the local champions in localizing SDGs? Well, they deliver the SDG mandate on the ground, understanding local needs and addressing local issues along with the local communities, coaching and mentoring, of course, to instill community ownership and ensuring no one is left behind in the community. Now, transformation takes time, but setting the process in a rights-based framework is key. That is by empowering the project beneficiaries to become project partners and moving them to become project owners through the various innovative projects that are introduced to them at the local level. Our local champions or our solution partners ensure that all categories of people be part of the SDG micro projects designed for the youths, women, elderly, people with disabilities, fishermen, farmers, and not forgetting, of course, the indigenous people in our beloved country. The solution or the SDG micro projects are implemented once our research team identifies and prioritizes the issues through an issue mapping exercise determined together with the people on the ground. Many innovative solutions emerge from the ground, and our local champions become the agents of change, working along with the people, addressing the issues. The issues addressed through the micro projects also provides in-depth lesson and content for policy advocacy and input for parliamentarians for policy discussions. Let me share some best examples. Number one, education empowerment. Our solution partner is the Right Track Education. This is a handphone repair workshop for 50 young people in Tubau and Belaga, remote villages in the Sarawak region, targeting specifically SDG 4.4 to increase the number of youths with technical and vocational skills. In the past, local people need to travel about 50 to 70 kilometers just to repair their handphones. But now these young people with the new skills, now they can repair phones. And some have indicated opening small handphone repair shops in the next phase of development in these two villages. Number two, My SDG Academy, established by our very own organization, APPGM-SDG, to undertake SDG-related training in partnership with universities, UNDP, private sectors, federal, state, and district government agencies, and specifically targeting SDG 4.4, education for sustainable development and global citizenship. Number three, gender empowerment. Our solution partner, Engku Aziz Center for Development Studies, University Malaya. This project is conducted in a low-cost, high-rise urban flat in Kuala Lumpur, empowering 20 bottom 40 women through bakery workshops, digital marketing, and product packaging and sales. And this specific SDG is effective participation and equal opportunities in economic development target 5.5. And our last project is freshwater supply and conservation. Our solution partner, Peace Welfare Club Sabah, developed a gravity power water pipe system for 206 houses in Sayap village in Sabah to supply clean water to the houses and local entrepreneurs. This project is specifically actually designed by the local youths for their issues to be addressed, and this run by them, and a committee is formed to manage this clean water supply. And our specific target is 6.4 and 15.1, sustainable use of fresh water. Now, what lessons that we have learned? This is my last slide. Local communities now can become local champions by actively advocating grassroots democracy, continuous capacity building of local champions, mobilizing women as agents of change in the local community, and building trust and long-term relationship and partnership. And finally, this is an interdependency hand-holding process, local champions as catalysts of localizing SDGs at the grassroots level in building and revitalizing the local resources and economy and giving it back to the people. This people-centered approach makes the topic today, building back better, more alive and realistic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. And now it gives me great pleasure to invite Ms. Nurliza Hashim, who is the CEO of Urbanist Malaysia, and she will be talking to us about localizing SDGs in Malaysian cities. Ms. Nurliza, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our global participants. Really happy to be here to share our works in this sustainable urbanization pathway, especially for Malaysia. And as previously mentioned by our eminent minister, as well as the first speaker, SDGs are very crucial. They form very clear guidelines, especially with set targets in building back better. And here locally and globally, we are all faced with the challenge of the 3 Cs, COVID-19 pandemic, the climate change, and conflicts. So I really believe that no country, no city is really spared, as we are impacted in big or small ways. And hence it is very important that sustainability be an important game changer as we transform our cities and nation. Taking these perspectives, I think this is where building back better is the best way in terms of how we think about our policies and how we provide new paradigm in terms of approaches and strategies in developing our cities. In Malaysia, we truly encourage our cities and local governments to prepare and set their pathway through the preparation of a Malaysia SDG Cities Roadmap. This is a national program towards localizing the 17 SDGs and has been aligned to our long-term plan that complements our vision of shared prosperity and the pathway towards equitable growth and development for all, as envisaged in our 12 Malaysia plan, as mentioned by our minister just now. Now, the Malaysia SDG Cities also intends to uplift the standards and status of our local governments, and they will assist local governments to align all its operation goals and all its objectives with the sustainable agenda to ensure that cities and communities' needs and priorities are achieved. It will also strengthen in terms of how they monitor their work track, also raise a lot of awareness and commitment together with local communities, create the platform for partnerships and facilitate local government to access to funding resources and to develop business models to finance SDG actions. Now, in preparing the SDG cities, the framework has actually been aligned with a lot of the work done by global organizations at the Asia Pacific level, as well as at the UN Habitat level. This is important because recognition of our processes and the way we approach in undertaking our local pathway and roadmaps is very important. And one of the other things that the Malaysia SDG cities emphasize on is actually on vertical integration. The importance of integrating with national, state, as well as local policies are important to ensure that the strategies undertaken at the local level are more integrated in nature. This will also assist in terms of aligning to voluntary national review, which Malaysia has actually commit to report every other 4 years. Now, Malaysia SDG Cities Action Plan actually is a 3-step process in which we encourage cities to actually understand where they are, set their vision again, and at the end of the day, set their actions and roadmap towards 2030. Then on, we also encourage Malaysian cities to prepare their progress report, where voluntary local reviews are then prepared, and this can be shared with the global community, especially at the HLPF level. And this year, we have Kuala Lumpur, one of the cities that is sharing their voluntary local review at the global level. And in doing so, we have developed local indicators, and this is again very important because measuring targets by local indicators will also ensure that we are addressing local issues at a more grounded and granular level. And the Malaysia SDG cities also ensure that sound institutional and governance as part of the process to support SDG localization. So the process includes looking at institutions and which departments are actually adopting SDGs and how far these SDGs have been implemented and adopted locally or internally. So as mentioned by Encik Kamaruzaman just now, we have a group of cities now today which have been part of this SDG cities network, and we have about 11 of them actually, and this is where we are very, very excited because 3 have completed all the way up to voluntary local review and 8 are in preparation of their SDG roadmap and their VLR. And most importantly is we also realize there's a gap. Once we talk about voluntary local review, there's also the subnational, which is in the case of Malaysia, which is our state government. And Malaysia is happy to note that Selangor is the first state that is preparing their Selangor voluntary subnational review, which we aim to submit in this year or early next year. And this will allow all levels of government to actually ensure that the SDGs are implemented well. And once this process is being adopted in a more holistic manner, then I believe that this is where you can measure the implementation at the national level. And just to share with all people in the room today is that we also have our SDG Center. Again, this is an important milestone for us because the SDG Center is not only a center that shares the work that has been done locally, but also it provides the conduit for new efforts and measures that's being done by the city to be shared with other communities. So I hope that we have a lot of work more to do moving forward, and there's still a lot of challenges that we need to address, especially in areas of policy integration, coordination and implementation of the sustainable agenda, local data, which is still a big challenge, and most importantly is a challenge on financing some of the SDG projects and progress. So I thank for the organizers for allowing us to share what we've done today, and we really hope that moving forward, this will be something that could be adopted by everyone else. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Puan Nurliza. Thank you. And thank you to all our speakers. Now let us go on quickly to our question and answers. The team, I think, will present a slide of questions that we have received. May I invite the slide to be presented on the screen, please? Thank you. We have not much time. I think we only have about 5 minutes. So let's see how many questions we can get through. And I believe we will revert back with responses later as well. So please do bear with us. We can't get back to you now. So, oops. Zol, I think the thing is moving. Okay, thank you. So we have 4 questions, I think. So what is the main measure of success for sustainable housing policies at the federal level? Perhaps, Mr. Kamaruzaman, can I invite you to respond to this?
Yeah. I think to measure success for sustainable housing policy at the federal level, in a way, quite a lot. But at present, what we have is we come out with the Malaysia Livability Index, which is under the Plan Malaysia, one of our department. And this index have already been applied this year, and hopefully that by coming years, the index will improve, because the index is accordingly follow what SDG index by the United Nations. And also we have our own Murli also, but we enlarge it so that it is suitable to our Malaysian kind of index. So we come out with the Malaysian Livability Index already, and this will in time show that the sustainable housing policy, also part of it, can be achieved.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Encik Kamaruzaman. Next Could we see the next? Thank you. So YB Rohani, we have a question for you here. Politicians fight each other. How is this possible via bipartisan participation in APPGM-SDGs? YB, would you like to share?
Yeah, it's okay, because when it comes to SDG, we don't really talk politics at all, and actually we really talk about the core of the matter that is for the people. So it's fine, it's fine. I think it's basically there is that general understanding that when it comes to SDG matters, all of us have the main concern of the people in our heart. So we put our heads together. We find good ideas how to go about to resolve a lot of the problems, be it in opposition areas, be it in government-led areas. So it's fine. Good hands. Thank you.
Thank you, YB, and I can really vouch for that. I've had first-hand experience in seeing this happen in, in action. So yes, it works. The next question, please.
Thank you.
Congratulations to all of you, actually. So next question is, how is KPKT, which is local authority, working with district office and social agencies such as welfare, health, education, women, etc.? Encik Kamaruzaman, I think this is to you again.
Once again, we know at the local government, they have not only weekly but monthly meeting with the state government officer. So with the state government officer, they will call all the head of the department in the state to discuss on the matter that arising in the state. So all the department, either health department or environmental and so on, they are in there. So they can contribute and discuss the problem. And the local community and the local government, they themselves in the state government represented by the housing division, which is quite a very powerful division which has direct impact to the state government. So I think there's no problem for them to discuss or come out solving problem and so on. It's already established at present.
Thank you, Encik Kamaruzaman.
Yeah.
And the last question, local champions are key. How do we recruit them and fund them? Is this partnership model and is it inclusive? James, maybe to you.
Yeah, thank you, Lavanya. Thank you for that question. Yes, our partnership model is very much inclusive because when we conduct the issue mapping exercise, while we are identifying the issues, we also identify the solution providers at the local community. What we are looking here is we are not looking at large organizations, who has, lots of experience in conducting, but we look for small organizations, even universities for the sake, they use this, the community as a lab, for them to conduct the projects and so forth, micro projects. So the solution providers are determined through our mapping exercise based on the issues. So it's by issues, the solution providers come on board with their expertise, and we do continuous monitoring and also capacity building for them. And our funding on this micro projects are by phases. There is a process. There is a tedious process that we go through. And this is also part of capacity building and good governance in ensuring the right projects actually reach to the right target group and so forth. So on the whole, our process is very inclusive, and we want to see that no one is left behind. And even our local champions also are geared towards that through our continuous monitoring and capacity building to meet that demand and also the requirement. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I think, yes, do we have another question, Joel? Yes, okay. Could you show it, please? Thanks, James. I think, yes, do we have another question, Joel? Okay. Yes, okay. Okay, thank you. Show it, please. I'm getting feedback here. So the, can you show the screen again, please? Yes, do we have another question, Joel? Oh dear. Yes, okay, keep
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Show it,
This
please.
what,
I'm
following what
getting
you
feedback here.
Okay.
So the, can
I
you show
answer,
the screen
madam?
again, please? Please go ahead.
Madam?
Yes, do we have another question, Joel? Oh dear. Please carry on, Encik Kamaruzaman.
Okay. I answered earlier in the second question, and it's partially involved the livability index, as I've said earlier, is being mooted this year, and we have tried start using it the first half of this year, and following years will make it better. So for the time being, at global level, of course, we haven't yet being measured benchmark with any other index that are already existent, but we'll try. It's a good process to benchmarking with others index that we have at any level after this, I think.
Thank you, sir. And
Yeah.
maybe before I wrap up, I'd like to invite Ms. Nurliza to say, any final words, because the city's agenda is a very critical one as well. Anything, Ms. Nurliza?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think when it comes to cities, we know that urbanization is unstoppable. Is going to happen, and cities are always said to be the cause of all the problems that urbanization causes, including climate change. But I think we must also understand that cities are also where the solutions are. It's where all the opportunities are, and because of that, it's very important to invest in cities. So sustainable cities is, it's something that's so super urgent. It must be done, and whatever moving forward that cities are thinking of, whether it's building back better or trying to push for livability, I think the core agenda here is to think about the people that lives in the cities. Decisions that are made every day should be very, very sustainable, and thinking about the impacts tomorrow, the day after, or 10 years from now. And that's where I think we should be focusing a lot on the agenda on cities. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And really thank you to the esteemed panelists, and also thank you to all the participants for your very active questions and engagement in the session. Just to wrap up, I think we've heard a lot about how exactly this partnerships model works in Malaysia. Really excellent examples given by all our speakers in the context in which they were speaking from. We heard about voluntary local reviews that are being already prepared, and we are going to be presenting also in the HLPF from one city, Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. We heard about people-centric agenda, which is driven by the parliamentarians, and the interface that parliamentarians can provide between the people and the institutions in Malaysia, especially in terms of finance, and also ensuring that all constituencies are part of this journey by 2022. We heard about the 121 SDG projects already, micro projects, if you like, that are already underway from 2020 in partnership with the local CSOs, and how project beneficiaries become partners and then become actual project owners, how local champions become agents of change. So, and last but not least, we heard really good actions that are being taken at city level as well, with the SDG Cities Action Plan, and the importance of how the solutions come from the cities, not just the problems. So with that, thank you so much. It's been a really engaging session. We had a very short time, but I think we got huge nuggets of very rich information. So thanks very much to the esteemed. Thank you, sir. And thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lavanya and esteemed speakers for very diverse sharing and discussion. Before I pass the floor to the second panelist, which will be moderated by Professor Dr. Denison Jayasuriya, I would like to welcome Honorable Dato' Sri Saifuddin Abdullah, the Minister of Foreign Affairs Malaysia, which have just joined us in this room. Now I'm passing the floor to Dr. Denison to proceed with the second panel. Dato', the floor is yours.
Good morning and good evening, everyone. We are moving on to our second panel, and I think we have had a very interesting discussion. And I also thank that the Honorable Foreign Minister is here with us as he will do concluding remarks towards the end. Now, we looked at Malaysia and its best practices. The economy minister did acknowledge that while there are achievements, we also face challenges like many of the countries in the COVID and post-COVID period. And we have a lot of work to do, and this has to be done in a collaborative way. Now, in this side event, we thought it would be helpful if we can, in many ways, learn from our ASEAN partners. And I think the closest among the countries in ASEAN and part of our active foreign policy among ASEAN neighbors is with Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia. And so we thought, what are some of their achievements? What are some of their challenges? And where are they moving on? And what can we learn, and what can they share to us in this context? And even in the context of the midterm review of the SDGs that come in 2023 SDG Summit in September. So this is an opportunity for us to look back and look ahead in this session. And we have invited 3 academicians to join us. They have been active in their own countries as a national think tank and provided a lot of input, feedback, review, academic analysis, some independence on this. 3 speakers from the universities in Thailand, Philippines, and Indonesia. And we also got someone to also do a comparative analysis. So let me welcome Assistant Professor Chol Bunnang, the director of the SDG Move, Thammasat University. And Thailand has been very active in the process and also through ASEAN partnerships. Over to you, Prof. Chol.
Thank you very much, Professor Denison. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chon Bunnak. I am an assistant professor at Faculty of Economics, Thammasat University, and the director of SDG Move, a research center under Thammasat University. I am very honored to be invited to join this session. Thailand has experienced severe impact of COVID-19 economically and socially. Almost all economic sectors have been affected by the pandemic. Service sectors, especially tourism and hospitalities, were hit harder than others. The poor, migrant laborers, and other vulnerable groups were affected more than other groups, widening the inequality. Although Thai government has provided welfare schemes and subsidies to these vulnerable groups, some research suggests that these schemes might not be accessible to most vulnerable and the poorest of the poor, especially those in remote areas. This is why inclusive and sustainable recovery, which is at the center of the SDGs, cannot be achieved by the central government alone, but needs local efforts to reach these people in the way that fits with local context. One of the local best practices from Thailand is the case of Yala City Municipality, Yala Province in the far south region of the country. The municipality, led by Mr. Pongsak Yingchonjarean, initiated several policies using digital technologies to cope with COVID-19 and ensure inclusive recovery for the people in the city. In dealing with COVID-19, Yala municipality managed and monitored COVID-19 using digital technologies, actively procured vaccine and and established COVID-19 Fund for Yala, whose financial resource was mobilized from local private sector. The municipality also created its own online marketplace platform that targeted local enterprises and local consumers during COVID-19. Delivery system of the platform employed local motorbike taxi to increase their income during the pandemic. The municipality also uses Line Open Account to listen to people's voices, directly receive people requests and complaints. To make all of the implementations work, the municipality provided free Wi-Fi for the whole city as a basic infrastructure. The case of Yala municipality provides several lessons learned. First, digital technologies can be used to achieve inclusive development if properly designed and managed. Second, local government should play a role as a facilitator, platform manager, and regulator that enables local economy and society to be resilient. Third, local government also play a role as a mediator of multi-stakeholder partnership to mobilize resources from stakeholders for development initiative. Fourth, free and accessible digital infrastructure is crucial. Many more cities are being made to be more sustainable, inclusive, and resilient with efforts of municipalities all over Thailand, not only at Yala. Mediators such as the National Municipal League of Thailand plays crucial roles connecting all municipalities and creating a platform in which best practices can spread to other areas. Collaboration flourishes and innovations be created. The roles of municipality in the SDG implementation is still limited though. Decentralization process was stopped since the coup in 2014. The latest municipality election resumed last year in 2021 and Bangkok governor election in 2022. Several SDG issues are still under the responsibilities of the regional and provincial branch of central government agencies. Therefore, to fully localize the SDGs in the context of Thailand, strong partnership between municipalities and regional and provincial branches of the government agencies is needed. Moreover, in some area, for example, in the case of conflict on Jannat Industrial Estate in Songkhla province, the government tried to impose central economic policy on the local, which could risk losing local livelihood and ecological richness of the area, which totally contradicts the underlying principles of the SDGs. To move forward, three things are needed. First, we need a whole of the government and whole of society approach to the SDGs. The government needs to embrace the SDGs not only for the goals and targets, but the principles of sustainability, inclusivity, and resilience. All policies should be aligned with the sustainability principles. Platform for all stakeholders to participate in the SDG policy process are needed. Second, regional and provincial government personnel, as well as staff of municipalities, need capacity building on basic knowledge and principles of the SDGs and some ideas of how the SDGs can be utilized. And third, we need a set of locally meaningful, accurate, and up-to-date local indicators which can be connected to the SDG targets. We also need dashboards that show status of those indicators. The indicators and the dashboard should help all actors understand how their actions contribute to the local sustainability situation, both positive and negative, so as to adjust their actions to be more supportive to the sustainability agenda. So that will be my talk today. Thank you very much, Professor Dennison.
Thank you for that intervention and for illustrating the specific target groups that were affected through COVID, as well as an example of a municipality with digital technology and intervention. But at the same time, your concluding points for future policies, whole of government approach, the dashboard, and so forth is significant, and we wish you well in Thailand in that context. Let me move on to our second panelist, Professor Emma Porio. She is the professor of sociology and anthropology at de Manila University. She's also the project lead for investigation of coastal cities. Over to you, Prof. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Professor Datuk. Good evening here from Manila, and good morning in New York. I would like to thank the organizers of this for inviting me here. My talk today will focus on climate and disaster resilience because I believe You cannot sustain something that is not resilient. My short input is titled Lessons from COVID and Climate Disasters, Bounce Forward Together. If you look at all the logos below, these are all our partner local government units and also our partner universities and academics and civil society organizations that we work together because we believe that we can implement the sustainable development goals and be resilient by doing public-private partnerships. So we are living in the twin crisis of our time: climate and social inequality exacerbated by COVID, which basically increased poverty levels, widened inequality, and created new vulnerabilities. And I think really the fulfillment of the SDGs is very important in order to counter this. Also, because we have created an imbalance in the Earth's resources in terms of our extraction and consumption. And as the scientists would say, that at the rate we are consuming the Earth's resources, we would need 3 planets to sustain our lifestyle now. And really, that's a threat to the fulfillment of sustainable development goals. You can also see that in the top, short, medium, and long-term global risk, the number 1 is climate action failure, extreme events, and biodiversity loss. I just got this figure here. You'll see that because of COVID-19 and the droughts and the climate disasters, there's hunger in this region. And as you can see, we're lucky that here in the Philippines has 5% to 15%. Malaysia is better, a very good figure. Also in the Philippines, the level of vulnerability to climate disasters and COVID and it's really threatened the fulfillment of the SDGs. So our job really is to pave the road to resilient, inclusive, and sustainable development through inclusive policies, inclusive education programs, training and extension programs for community resilience. I think we have to integrate the adaptation with the Sustainable Development Goals and the Sendai framework. But by doing so, we can reduce the vulnerability and enhance the resilience of communities. Basically, we can locate, for the past 2 years in the lockdown, the threat of food insecurity, hunger, and also amidst the climate shocks, we really think that we have to focus on building transformational adaptation and really building community resilience. So I think within this, if we move this, the sustainable development can be achieved through the fulfillment of the sustainable goals, so development goals. So our strategy really in achieving the sustainable development goals is really what I call institutionalizing the resilience agenda through transfer action work, through tools, partnerships, networks, and coalitions. If you'll see here at the local, we partner with local universities, resilience councils, community-based organizations. At the national level, we have the National Resilience Council, the Office of Civil Defense, the Department of Local Government Units, interior and local governments, and then global and national. Our work really is focused on, we think that to achieve the sustainable development goals, we have to have the pillars, the resilience pillars. We believe that leadership and governance is very important. This can be shown with leadership that is committed and believe in empowered stakeholders, integrated development planning, and then we have believed that the 4 pillars of resilience: human development, sustainable local infrastructure, environmental sustainability, will lead basically to the achievement of the sustainable development goals. We also believe that the whole of society approach is the way to go. We have downscaled really from resilient local government unit in the city, and then at the barangay level, which is the lowest level, we think that the achievement of the sustainable development goals and resilience can be achieved when public-private partnerships assume the role and contribute to the building of community resilience and sustainability.
Emma, you have 1 minute.
Okay, so we believe that, the elements of community resilience and bouncing forward and achieving the sustainable goals, you have to contextualize the drivers of community resilience, increase absorptive, adaptive, transformative capacities, support sustained programmatic responses after the shock, and trust and empower the resilience innovations that employ basically the vertical, horizontal, and social networks towards convergent pathways to resilient and sustainable recovery. So I will conclude basically by saying that, in ASEAN Pacific community, we should be a true community that is not only geographically close, but not only belonging to the same social network, but it's feeling connected and responsible for what happens. Because humanity as our ultimate community, and the sustainability of our life here and the progress everyone depends on that. Thank you very much. I think my message to the ASEAN region is that if we want to go fast, go alone. But if we want to be sustainable, we want to be resilient, we have to work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Emma. I think the call for us to work together is very important, and also to see while at nation-state level, there seems to be a lot of initiatives, how can we strengthen the partnerships across countries? And maybe that is something we can take up at the Q&A. But I think the resilient model of both leadership and governance and your 4 key indicators, I think something really worthwhile for us to test out across the region and across countries to build back better, but you use not the term build back better, but you use bounce back. I think bounce back, build back, bouncing gives a much dynamic focus of, jumping and so forth. So that's significant. Let me move on to our third speaker, Professor Suzy Enna, Director of the SDG Center from Indonesia. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing the Indonesian experience, your challenges as well. Over to you.
Thank you, Professor Janison. Very good morning and good evening to all speakers and participants of HLPF. First, I would like to thank the organizer for having me in this important event of the high-level political forum. I would also like to greet all the attended participants. I am happy to share the lessons from Indonesia experience on building back better. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected all aspects of our lives and as individuals and as society. Furthermore, it has been proven that pandemic affect and also affecting many of our collective agendas, such as SDGs. COVID-19 is a multidimensional crisis. Not only it has reduced our economic growth to the lowest level since the Asian financial crisis 22 years ago, it has affected almost all development dimensions. It is natural to expect that many of the development targets outlined in our Sustainable Development Goals to be achieved in 2030 will be affected. Our research in SDG Center UNPAD on the impact of global COVID-19 crisis on SDGs achievement in ASEAN countries found that the COVID-19 pandemic interrupted almost all the SDGs indicators of ASEAN countries. On average, across countries and indicators, the pandemic will leave the SDGs indicators in 2030 to be 2 to 3% lower than what would have been without COVID-19, equivalent to around 1.6 years delay of achievement. Study found that 97% SDGs indicator was interrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The other 3% are those that are already being achieved before 2030, and COVID-19 doesn't interrupt in such a way that delays the achievement beyond 2030. The country with the least indicator interrupted is Malaysia, 43.5%, followed by Vietnam, 48%. Meanwhile, the country with the most significant number of indicators interrupted is Indonesia, 70.3%, followed by the Philippines, 68%. From academic point of view, disruption of SDGs in ASEAN countries is also a high relevance because members of ASEAN react and mitigate the COVID-19 pandemic quite differently. Vietnam's decisiveness in handling the pandemic and avoiding a serious crisis deserve praise. Meanwhile, the Philippines seems to be struggling to contain the virus. Indonesia used a different approach to subtle balance health and economic aspect, but with the risk of prolonged pandemic. All may have a different impact on how this pandemic will affect their future economic development trajectory, including the SDGs agenda. To build back better, Indonesia immediately responded to the pandemic by refocusing its development program on health system reforms, social system reforms, disaster resilience reforms, and economic recovery. Furthermore, the government also enacted a long-run adjustment by emphasizing and reorientating policies related to sustainability issues. As a result, a sustainable recovery is becoming a priority that will enable us to build for better after COVID-19. Sustainability is an engine to create a more resilient economy and more equitable development. And furthermore, the government of Indonesia has undertaken some steps to provide more adaptive and responsive planning strategies that can rapidly answer any future challenges and new situations ahead. To recover from COVID-19 pandemic, Indonesia promotes low carbon economic growth, encourages all partners, including businesses and communities, to prioritize budget allocation during the recovery period and promotion of technological innovations to accelerate the transition to an inclusive, just, resilient, low carbon economy. Increase clean energy mix usage, enable clean mobility, stimulate transformation of infrastructure and low carbon buildings, support industry to transition to low carbon emission, and invest in nature-based climate solution. To build back better, the government of Indonesia has also redesigned Indonesian economic transformation to be more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable using six strategies as game changers toward prosperous Indonesia, including strategy 1 in focusing on competitive human resources, health system transformation, better education and characters, research and innovation. Strategy 2 will be on productive economic sector of industrialization, and then strategy 3 on green economy focuses on low carbon and circular economy, blue economy, and energy transition. Strategy 4 on digital transformation, and then strategy 5 on domestic economic powerhouse focuses on connectivity and super hub and domestic value chains. Strategy 6 on new capital focuses on new growth sources and regional economic equity. So that all strategies can work well, first it is necessary to collaborate with all stakeholders of government and parliament, private sectors, universities, philanthropy, community, and media. And second, of course, localizing SDGs is essential. That's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zuzi, on the intervention, and especially to show the extensive intervention by the Indonesian government, and to see how this rebuilding from COVID is strengthened. I thought Indonesia also has a very strong decentralization approach, which empowers local communities. Maybe that is something you might want to comment later on, which empowers local communities more. And we can look at that as well. So thank you very much. And we come to our final speaker in this panel too, Mr. Alizan Mahadi, the Senior Director of ISIS Malaysia. He has been very active in the SDGs in Malaysia, providing analysis and so forth, and also policy intervention, ground research on the APPG localizing programs. But we have asked Alizan to do some comparative indication or areas, and where do we move further from here, and possibly what follow-up to this in our preparation for the 2023 SDG Summit and midterm review as a whole. And maybe ASEAN could take some lead and some follow-up discussion. Alizan, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Denison, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. A very good evening from Kuala Lumpur. Good morning for those in New York. Speaking about the topic at hand, building back better, localizing SDGs itself is a very key strategy to ensure that the recovery process is an inclusive one. This is essential as localization of SDG ensures that the focus of the recovery is not only for achievements to be had at the macro level, but also at the subnational levels. So in this sense, for my intervention, I've been asked to do a quick comparative assessment across the three countries in this panel, especially in their efforts to localize SDGs. And I will do this by doing a quick comparison on the reporting and the strategies for localizing the three countries featured in this panel, and also some lessons learned, in particular linking it to the context of Malaysia. Okay, firstly, on reporting, I think reporting is a very key component of the SDGs itself, as it is the only mechanism for international oversight, despite it being a voluntary mechanism. So through the VNRs, it demonstrates the commitment to the SDGs, and we can use it as a yardstick to gauge overall commitment to the SDGs. As many of you know, there is no strict requirement on its reporting, including its frequency. So in this sense, it is quite impressive that all countries have reported VNRs more than once. However, it differs in frequency. Indonesia has reported 3 PNRs at the HLPF, and this is undertaken once every 2 years, in the years of 2017, 2019, 2021. Philippines report once every 3 years and has reported 2 VNRs and will report 1 this year, so it will be 3 by this year. Thailand and Malaysia are reporting once every 4 years and have reported twice up until now. So here you can see that the reporting frequencies differ across the different countries. In terms of localization, I think we've heard in the previous panel about the voluntary local reviews. This is relatively new in the region. From what I gather, all countries have committed to VLRs. Indonesia has reported at least 2 VLRs in Surabaya and East Java province. Philippines at least 1 in Naga City. Thailand at least 1 in Nakhon Si Thammarat municipality. And Malaysia has produced 2 VLRs, Shah Alam and Subang Jaya, as we heard earlier. And Malaysia is also looking at 6 cities which have initiated the VLR process as well. So just to highlight here in terms of the reporting, it shows a few important points. Firstly, that all countries do report both at the national and subnational levels, and localizing SDGs is being reported by all countries. Secondly, that the level of reporting differs across countries with variances in frequency of reporting. And thirdly, the reporting differs nationally and subnationally. So it doesn't mean necessarily there's a link between the years of reporting at the national level or at the subnational level. Okay, I'll go into some of the localization strategies very quickly of the 3 countries that I can gather. Firstly, in terms of Indonesia, the focus, one of the key interesting strategies I would like to highlight here is the focus on villages through the village SDGs. And this is done through the Ministry of National Development Planning, or Bappenas, collaborating and coordinating with the Ministry of Home Affairs in ensuring SDGs are mainstream at the provincial district, at the village level. So this is one interesting strategy that we can see from Indonesia. Philippines, 2 strategies that I will highlight. One is a clear cascading of SDGs within the inclusion in the regional development plans to facilitate localization of SDGs. Also, it is being cascaded down to the local government unit, as highlighted earlier. Secondly, one interesting case in the context of Philippines is also due to the Supreme Court ruling on the Madanas Garcia case. It resulted in devolution that resulted in local governments receiving and expanded their responsibilities and mandates. So this policy on full devolution gave local governments an even more central role in SDG implementation. Finally, in Thailand, I think one of the key interesting points is there is a very targeted approach in terms of, especially at the municipality level. The National Economic and Social Development Council partners with the Ministry of Interior and other relevant agencies to assess the capacities and readiness of various areas across the country in terms of SDG implementation. And Thailand has targeted 9 provinces and 5 local government authorities from 6 regions and 4 development groups as pilot areas. I won't go through so much Malaysia. We've heard from the previous panel, but just to highlight that there are 2 key strategies in the context of Malaysia. One is through local authorities, which is more the formal local government, and the other is through APPGM-SDG, which is adopting or utilizing member of parliaments as a convening power, as well as civil society as a whole of society approach. Okay, just before closing, some of the lessons learned that I would highlight very quickly. Firstly, the importance of cascading from the planning level of the national level into the regional development plans and so on. Malaysia has its 5-year development plan, so there is a need and there's an opportunity to learn from other countries in how it cascades to the local level. Secondly, the importance of targeting as well. We've heard in the Malaysian context, SDG cities as well, so this is something that we can learn from different countries. The third, learning from Indonesia, is a focus on villages. Interestingly enough, for example, in the context of Malaysia, this is something that we can pick up, especially in the Ministry of Rural Development, which we can learn from our counterpart in Indonesia that has mainstream SDGs to the Ministry of Villages Development and Disadvantaged Areas. One other very important lesson learned here is a focus on decentralization and devolution. We've heard this in Philippines. I think Dr. Dennison mentioned in Indonesia. And generally speaking, in the context of Malaysia, there's still a lack of resources at the local level, lack of political empowerment at the local level as well. So there's a lot to learn across in the region in terms of strategies for decentralization and devolution of powers in implementing SDGs. And my final point is concurring with Professor Chol on the importance of indicators at the local level. The SDGs provide an opportunity for collecting disaggregated data at the local level, and this is one strategy that can be used to further implementation of SDGs and building back better across the region. So I think with that, just my final point is one of the key advantages of the SDGs is for this opportunity for learning on development models across the different regions, because we are essentially going towards common goals. So I once again thank and congratulate the organizers for today, because the SDGs allow for this cross-fertilization of ideas and development models. I'll stop there. Thank you, Dr. Dennison.
Thank you very much, Alizan, for that comparative analysis to learn not just from policy interventions, but also from concrete possibilities and lessons from our ASEAN neighbors, and in some of the key points that you have said, then possibly a greater collaboration among academics and think tanks to put things together for the midterm review. Now, I was already told that we are coming to the close time, but as a moderator and organizer, I thought we can give some leeway to our panelists from Philippines, Indonesia, and Thailand with some Q&A. I just want to check with the foreign minister if we can extend by 5-10 minutes. Okay, thank you, sir. We will carry on. Puan Rama, just please note that. I've asked for all the questions to be put up, and then we can see who among the 4 panelists want to answer, and maybe if you each took 2 minutes to look at it. Now, question 1, what accountability system exists in your respective countries to ensure local government manages to hit their SDG targets? We know we are behind target, but what kind of accountability system? Question 2, municipalities facilitate inclusive development. What indicators or methodologies applied to ensure the voices of the poor and the marginalized community is heard for their betterment? We heard of resilient strategies like coastal communities and so forth. 3, is localizing possible without greater democracy and inclusive structures for participation? So it's ground democracy and what can be learned. 4, policymakers tend to approach climate change and social inequalities separately. I think Prof. Emma's point on on her resilient strategy. How was this possible in Philippines to link the two? Possibly, is it just academicians or the civil servants have done that as well? Finally, whole of society approach is key, but governments seem to restrict CSOs which are critical of government. That means more human rights, SDG background. What way forward? Can I ask each to just take one question? Can I start with Alizan? And then we work backwards. Is that possible? Alizan, to you first.
Sure, Dato'. Can I just ask to put back the question?
Yeah, if we can have the questions up so that is that possible, Zoel or Panir? Yeah.
I'll just continue with the final question. Whole of society approach is key,
Okay.
but governments seem to restrict CSO, which are critical of government. What way forward? And I think we can share here from the experience in Malaysia of the APPGM-SDG, as I highlighted in terms of, especially in terms of localizing SDGs in the context of Malaysia. It is two-pronged. One is through the formal institutions, which is through the local government, but secondly is through whole of society approach led by members of parliament, but the secretariat is also the Civil Society Alliance on SDGs. So it doesn't have to be the same structure everywhere around the world, but just to highlight here that one approach is to do it two-pronged, one through the formal institutions, but another prong is to also find a way in the context of every country to include civil society in a more independent manner. So the APPGM-SDG approach is one such model that I think can bring in more of a civil society inclusiveness within the process. Second question, I'll try to answer a very tough question. Is localizing possible without greater democracy and inclusive structures for participation? But I think the answer here is, of course, it will be very difficult without greater democracy, and this is a challenge in particular. For example, in the context of Malaysia, one challenge that we have is the lack of local elections in the context of Malaysia. However, this is where, once again, the APPGM-SDG model utilizes the member of parliament as local SDG champions. So again, what I would like to highlight here is that the SDG as a platform, as a space, as a tool, provides an opportunity to democratize development, and it really needs to be done deliberately. Thank you, Dato'.
Thank you very much, Alizan, for that intervention. Can I invite Professor Suzy Anna to pick any of the questions, at least one, briefly, please. Thank you.
Okay. I think I would like to answer the question about what accountability system exists in your respective countries to ensure local government manage to hit their sustainable development targets. In Indonesia, we have a system of monitoring evaluation in respect to the action plan of SDGs, either in national and subnational level. And the Ministry of Planning Board, as a coordinator of SDGs in Indonesia, assess the implementation of SDGs and provide incentive in the form of rewards. Yeah, it's gonna be rewards. Still in planning. And there are also a system to assess the accountability of government and other stakeholders by monitoring evaluation report in yearly basis and 6-month basis for monitoring and for evaluations yearly basis. Then we have to report it to the Secretariat of SDGs national. We also have a dashboard SDGs to monitor the achievement of subnational SDGs achievements so that we can understand the dynamic of the achievement of SDGs, either in national level and also in subnational level.
Thank you, Prof. Can I pass on to Professor Emma, please?
Yes, I'd like to take the question about the separation of climate and social inequality. Yes, in fact, our laws basically separate climate and also disaster risk reduction. But my argument basically is that when you look at SDGs, so poverty, hunger, gender, access to potable water, and many others, you have to put them together, because access to basic services, you can see that it's the poor really. And also in terms of, you know, hunger and poverty. So really, yes, I know the government really tries to separate it, and in fact uses the word equity rather than inequality, because they're afraid of that. But really what we're trying to, in our work with local governments and academic partners and national government agencies, we really think that you have to put them together. The widening inequality is very much connected to the increase in damages and losses from climate disasters, and you have to put them together. I will not say we have been very successful, but we're trying to push the government really to link these two issues together. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think in a sense, we are challenging the way development policies are being formulated, and that is rethinking of development as a whole. And I think this might be a valuable contribution from us in the way governments plan and also the way governments deliver. Can I ask Assistant Professor Chol for your intervention on your choice of questions?
Yes, I would like to answer to question 4 and the other questions too. For the question 4, I think I would like to add to the point that Professor Emma was talking about. I think we have to try to implement goals and targets without separating the sustainability principles from the implementation. I mean, SDG at the core, there are sustainability, inclusivity, and resilience at the center. I mean, even though we're trying to push forward any goals or targets, we must not forget those principles. So if we don't forget it, we will not separate climate change and social inequality, because when we try to achieve climate change, we also have to think about inclusivity of those policies as well. So that's my response to the question 4. And actually question 1, 2, 3, and 5 is actually connected in the sense that we are talking about a policy space for civil society to play a role as a monitoring and accountability system. In Thailand, we have a lot of oppression from the government in terms of like limiting, the government is limiting policy space for the CSO. So what we're trying to do in the country is that we're trying to move through academic sector, and we believe that through data, through knowledge, and through research, we can actually mobilize people in a more democratic way, in a more rational and knowledge-based way. And that would increase like credibility of the movement, and that would I really hope that it would also have some like power relations more equal with the government. So I think one way to make things more democratic and expand the policy space of the CSO is through academia, through knowledge, and through research. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much to panel 2 and for all that intervention. I think it's a lot, it's difficult to summarize, but I think in future we need to look at not just the whole of nation approach, but how do we collaborate much stronger, because a coastal village in Malaysia or Philippines or Indonesia or Thailand are actually interrelated to fishing resources, or migrant workers or refugees, and so forth. So I think there will be a lot of work to move beyond the nation state. I know UNSCAP does work on this, but maybe ASEAN, maybe the ASEAN partners in a smart way, or the think tank groups that are here could lead it further. So I think creating the space, not just for civil society, but also for academia to interact much more. And this idea of rational knowledge base is key. But I think social movements show us from the ground that it's not possible if people don't have a direct voice and say. And so the empowerment of the grassroots is most critical rather than a top-down elite approach. So thank you very much to the panel, and I hope from the Malaysian end, especially from APPGM, the Foreign Ministry, as well as ISIS Malaysia, we can see how we can strengthen the collaboration. Maybe if we can raise the funds, we could have a face-to-face consultation in Kuala Lumpur in the build-up to 2023. I'm just rubbing it in because the foreign minister is listening, and hopefully, funds and resources are made available. So back to Puan Rama, thank you very much, and I hope we continue in this conversation together to learn from our neighbors, to impact on building back or bouncing back, that without our neighbor, it is not possible for us to see progress and sustainability for ourselves. Puan Rama, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Denison and esteemed speakers for panel 2. It was a very diverse sharing and discussion. Without further ado, I'm delighted to pass the floor now to the Honorable Dato' Sri Saifuddin Abdullah, Minister of Foreign Affairs Malaysia, to give his closing remark. Dato' Sri, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera, and Idul Adha Mubarak to everyone. Now, let me first congratulate the organizers and also thank all the co-sponsors of today's HLPF, namely my colleague Dato' Sri Mustafa Muhammad, the Minister for Economic Affairs, the Economic Planning Unit, the APPGM-SDG Malaysia, ISIS Malaysia, the Malaysian CSO SDG Alliance, the moderators and speakers, with special mention to Denison for working very hard to get this session organized. Also, thank you to Aznifa from Wisma Putra for assisting and collaborating with Denison. Now, my dear brothers and sisters, already we are faced with all kinds of challenges in the world, even at the time when we were formulating the SDGs back in 2011 until the launch of the SDGs. I'm actually reading a book by A.C. Grayling. The title of the book is For the Good of the World, and I strongly recommend that people read this book. I haven't finished reading it, I must confess, but I find it very interesting. Now, and I'm paraphrasing A.C. Grayling as I speak. There are big challenges facing the world today. Climate change, technology, justice, you can include human rights, the backsliding of globalization and democracy, and so on and so forth. The pandemic simply proved that these challenges are real. Besides, it also shows more succinctly the many gaps within our society, the imbalances within our society. And if I go back to the bigger challenges as a whole, the imbalances come in various forms: North versus South, West versus East, rich and poor, the advanced and the least developed countries. And then we have the haves and the have-nots, those with vaccine, those without vaccine, those with boosters, those without boosters. And we can go on all kinds of imbalances. And while we were discussing and while we were formulating the SDGs, and even as we are speaking, there is still the need for us to reform international architectures, international systems. Most of the systems that we are experiencing today are archaic, and on the other hand, are not based on justice as we understand it. The SDGs is probably the most important international agreement that we have ever come to agree upon. But all I'm saying is the SDGs is not enough, because more often than not, as believers of the SDGs, and we embrace the SDGs, and we practice, we execute the SDGs in many, many forms, at national level, at local level, at the grassroots level. Some of us are politicians, some of us are government officers, activists, and we all mean well. But there is a limit to what we can do, because the international architecture forbids us from doing more. Just look at the questions. Just look at the 5 questions that we were answering. We were trying to answer. I mean, what is the best accountability for a local government? If you ask me, it's local government election. So we in Malaysia have a lot of problems. Dato' Rahani was being very diplomatic in answering it, but I'm sure she knows exactly that the real answer is to have a local government election. And until you get that, we will not be accountable. Someone answered just now that we are only accountable to the cabinet, not even to the parliament. You are definitely right. And that's our problem. So we can do SDG as much as we can, but it is within a certain structure that is archaic and is not based on justice. So we need to reform the architecture, both at the international level and also at the national level. Now, coming back to our discussion, I think there are also other areas that we need to improve. For example, we need more subject matter experts on some of the areas. And when it comes to government, we have a problem because good government officers got transferred from one place to another. Saudara Kamrul Zaman is now Deputy Secretary General. He is doing very well. But will he be the Secretary General in charge of SDG? I don't know. He may be transferred and become Secretary General of something else. And we have a new Secretary General who have to learn about running SDG projects. And this continues every now and then. Politicians, how many Rohani do we have in Malaysia, for example? Not so many. And we need more politicians who are policy oriented. And here I come back to the same question that I was alluding to at the outset. As much as we need to do, and I'm all for it, that we need to do this localizing the SDGs, and I take my, I salute Denison and all the other speakers that these are the right thing to do. But at the same time, we must also sensitize others that the architecture and the framework has to be reformed. Now, I would like to propose that we keep this group intact. I agree with what Denison was trying to say. And if I may share some deadline that we may want to look at and try to do something on the sidelines. And by the way, we must also get our sideline ideas to mainstream so that we are not always only at the sideline. Yeah. We have another meeting on the 19th of July. And then we have the United Nations General Assembly, the third week of September. I think we should try to lobby so that as many heads of government would speak on the SDG in whichever fashion they wish to. We need more and more. My worry is that this coming, UNGA will be filled with the Ukraine conflict, which is okay. Then we ask head of government, yes, speak about the Ukraine conflict and show that this is one of the reasons, all the more reason we need to build back better using the SDG framework. So we need to campaign in whichever way so that our leaders speak at the UN General Assembly on and about and for the SDG. At the ASEAN level, we have the ASEAN Summit in November. The problem with the ASEAN system is sometimes at the Leaders Summit, it tends to be very political. And some of the good work that is done by ministers in charge of climate change, ministers in charge of education and technology didn't actually go into the discussion at the summit level. And that is really something that we don't like to see happening all the time. So we should also try to lobby the ASEAN Summit. But the ASEAN Summit is prepared by the Foreign Ministers meeting, which is on the 1st and 2nd of August. So Denison, if I can seek your cooperation, some kind of a note coming out of today's meeting and the meeting on 19th of July is addressed to the Secretary General of ASEAN, so that ASEAN foreign ministers will look into it. And then this can be then taken to, as I said, the meeting on the 1st and 2nd of July is preparing for, the meeting is on the 1st and 2nd of August in Cambodia. So that meeting is preparing the Leaders Summit in November. Now, those are some dates which I think we can make use of in terms of mainstreaming the ideas that we were discussing today, and also what we will be discussing on the 19th of July. So Denison, you are very good at merisik. I think we need to have some kind of face-to-face meetings somewhere along the line. We will try and fork out the money. If not everyone, then at least a considerable number of people, I would say from the ASEAN member states, to do something more concrete. No, I mean, everyone is doing concrete work, but what I'm trying is to bring it up, to upscale the discussion, and some of those very good case studies that need to be brought up, mainly to sensitize leaders on what they need to do. I mean, I don't think we can reform the whole thing within 1 or 2 years, but at least we need to sensitize our heads of government in ASEAN and beyond, but we can start with ASEAN first and see how we can best do our part together, and also getting them to do their part in supportive of our work. Thank you, Denison, and thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Dato' Sri. I'm sure our team will put up a report. We will share it with Wisma Putra and your mission and get back to you as soon as possible within this week. Thank you very much, sir, for the very positive response. Over to Rama.
Yeah, thank you so much, OAB Dato' Sri, for your remarkable closing remarks. We have not come to the end of our event, but before we go off, can we just have a group photo with everyone on the screen and open the camera? All right, thank you so much, everyone, for your time and contribution. I wish everyone a good day ahead, and let's keep in touch.